Thank you for joining us in This Week in Turkey. I am Murat Türsan. Tonight, we'll be doing part 2 on BTK's mass surveillance scandal, and investigative journalist and tech expert Füsun Nebil will be joining us in the studio. The government says economic confidence numbers are the lowest in a year this month. Turkey continues its very best to launch another military offensive into Syria. The opposition says don't buy cars, and what was supposed to be a friendly soccer game between Ukraine and a Turkish team turns ugly. Our main story tonight, BTK 2.0. Last week, Medyascope's Kılıçdaroğlu broke the story that what is supposed to be a telecom regulatory body in Turkey is spying on the web traffic of potentially every single internet user in Turkey. If you happen to be in Turkey and if you happen to be using the internet, Turkey's Information and Communication Technology Authority, otherwise known as BTK, knows about it. But not only that, they are watching. BTK gets fed your internet traffic every hour. BTK knows your location, communications, who you talk to, what you read, what you watch, what you do, when you do it. And perhaps the biggest crime of them all, no one cares. Mainstream media outlets have not picked up the story. The opposition has been silent, except one single party, HDP, who has made a request for parliamentary investigation that will probably go nowhere. Perhaps in a world where war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength, being constantly monitored is not newsworthy. Well, fine. We know that the government is watching us, but do we know why we're so interesting that they are watching us? Füsun Nebil will break that down in just a little bit, but let's get the details first.
Last week, documents obtained by Medyascope's Kılıçdaroğlu confirmed suspicions of government mass surveillance across the whole of Turkey. BTK, a regulatory agency under the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, gave explicit instructions to internet service providers for mass surveillance of internet users on the 15th of December 2020. The second installment in Medyascope's BTK-gate files focuses on how the government can use the information it gathers from users in the last 1.5 years. BTK has absolute authority over all telecommunication sectors. In a memo sent to internet service providers on the 15th of December 2020 titled ISS Traffic Log Pattern, BTK orders providers to reserve special servers to channel traffic records to BTK. BTK considers 11 terabytes of data fed from service providers a day to be a normal amount. Taking into consideration that BTK demands traffic data from a couple of hundred providers, it's safe to assume that BTK expects to receive a petabyte of data per day, or a couple of millions of gigabytes. In other words, BTK's data saving and processing capacity could be far higher than previously thought. Another matter is BTK's institutional capacity. The experts who spoke to Medyascope all agree that technical infrastructure for gathering the data is the hard part, but leveraging the data after is not much easier. Digital marketers think that, even if it were legally obtained, making the gathered data compatible with pre-existing datasets for marketing would be enormously difficult and costly and far less effective than user data provided by Google or Facebook. So profiting off of the data of 88 million users through mass surveillance is not feasible in the short term. It's difficult to pinpoint a single use for BTK to leverage the data. But experts who spoke to Medyascope suggest that the data could be used for profiling, blacklisting, and even blackmailing people. Through profiling, algorithms could sort similar people into behavioral groups and guess their reactions to certain events. And with blacklisting, the information gathered from citizens could legally or illegally be turned into information cards that certain people within the government could access. This could potentially lead to systematic discrimination. For example, these information cards could be used during hiring for public positions, or could even be used in prosecutions. Experts that spoke to Medyascope were particularly concerned about the upcoming 2023 elections. Experts warned that BTK could use the collected data to influence voter choice or the election altogether. This BTK scandal is oddly reminiscent of the Cambridge Analytica data scandal in 2016 during the US presidential race. Cambridge Analytica psychologically and politically profiled potential voters to target them for political ads. The information gathered by BTK, however, if analyzed in detail, includes scores more information, everything from political leanings to socioeconomic status.
Joining me now in the studio, investigative journalist and tech expert Füsun Nebil, who worked with Kılıçdaroğlu on breaking the BTK case. Ms. Nebil, thank you for joining us. So, I have several questions. My first concern has been that really no mainstream media outlet has picked up the story, and it is my deep concern that no one seems to understand the gravity of the situation and the lack of legality involved here. Now, you've began writing about this piece. Now, let's start with the BTK. BTK was founded as an autonomous organization, but you say that it was captured by the government in what you call a regulatory capture. Is that correct?
Yes, this is a telecommunication expression in that kind of, privatization and liberalization processes are very difficult periods. So need a kind of that institutions like BTK we have in from 2000. First, they established to organize the market. This is a kind of regulatory, competition regulatory.
Right, so it was intended to regulate fair trade.
Yes.
Amongst the ISPs.
Difference is competition regulators are working on established markets. But this kind of regulatory bodies in telecommunication are trying to establish the sector, the market. Difference is that. But as you know, telecom is very interesting sector, also can be used for intelligence.
Of course.
So governments always use that kind of options.
Right.
By that reason, BTK was also working on this trail. What is that regulatory capture? It means a regulatory is not autonomous, although seems to be autonomous,
right?
But working accordingly with the political people, for example.
So it was supposed to be politically independent, not dependent on any one political party in the government, but you're saying that it's basically become the ruling government's arm. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true.
I see. And you've also begun to write about BTK's funding. Now, as you say, BTK is not just some two-bit government organization. It is actually extremely wealthy and has these resources available to them. So where is the BTK's funding coming from?
You said it is autonomous, established like as an autonomous institution because should be establish a market. So from the beginning, budget was coming from the sector, industry operators,
right,
as a part of income.
Right.
First, in 2000 somewhere, it was not big incomes because, as you know, the especially mobile sector is very small at that time. But as time goes by, now it is huge. Even we have in Turkey 11 something a regulatory institution, and 10 of them have a budget, half of BTK.
So when you put 10 of those regulatory agencies together, their budget isn't even half, or is half of BTK.
Yes.
That's how
For
wealthy
example,
it is.
In 2022,
Yes,
it is something 3.5 billion Turkish liras for 10 institutions and 7 billion Turkish liras for one BTK.
right. Just one institution gets 7 billion, while all the others have to make do with, well, what is it?
They have something 500-600 staff So the expense is 300 million Turkish liras. And the others...
Wait, I'm sorry. They have a staff of about 500 people.
500 or 600.
500 or 600 people for 7 billion liras. I'm sorry to cut you off. That was just amazing to me. Please continue.
So they are spending a lot of somewhere. For example, they bought that intelligence software and the other stuff, and the rest of the money are going to the government as kind of tax, indirect tax.
I see. So they're taking the money from internet service providers
and
who take
us.
The money from us, and in turn, about
Consumers.
7 billion, which is increasing annually with each year, by the way, goes to BTK, and of course, then it goes to the government's treasury. Well, that's fantastic. But let's talk about why the BTK would find us commoners so interesting that they would want to spy on us. So we've spoken to several tech experts, and they say that the data BTK gathers cannot directly be used without significant processing. It cannot directly be used to sell us things for marketing data. And that data they get from Facebook, Google, AdWords, etc., it's more useful to them. So I don't think that they are actually trying to make more money off of us, but they have other reasons for why BTK would want to spy on us. So potentially, why would they want to spy on us? Your thoughts?
At first, we noticed that they want to get that kind of data in 2013. It is interesting time, Edward Snowden was also show us for United States. Governments in the 21st century, I think, want to get that kind of data with the political reasons. Yes, you are right. It is not using very easy like Google, Facebook, but you can use that kind of data with the, today there is big analytical companies. They are analyzes the data and gives some information to you to manage the consumer perspectives. In Cambridge Analytica, what we were saying that they use that data to obtain political views of the people and change. For example, we know that a lot of millions fake news they published over Facebook in advertisement mode, and gave the 4 people micro-targeting. That means some angles to change especially the states in United States. Hillary Clinton and Trump was even. They tried to change that kind of small differences.
Yes.
This is very interesting. We don't know why BTK is trying to take all the data. We don't know. Maybe they are following some people one by one. Maybe they are getting that information to store and use someday or other. Maybe they are trying to put some political strategies over that data.
I see.
For example, if somewhere there is one kind of political views, you can move some people there to change the mixation. And we don't know.
I see. So what you were describing, the Cambridge Analytica, that was actually quite effective because there were a lot of people who said, I voted for Obama twice, but then I went and voted for Trump. I mean, sure, Hillary Clinton was less than an ideal candidate, But I do believe that people are underestimating how effective the Cambridge Analytica system was.
They don't know.
No, they have no idea.
We noticed that after the election in 8 November, they gave an advertisement in England, in UK. So we noticed after that what that Cambridge Analytica is doing.
I see. All right. So let's get to our next question here. Now, BTK is potentially receiving millions upon millions of terabytes of information. And I have seen the common criticism, or I wouldn't say criticism, but people are suspecting that really a regulatory agency in the Turkish government, could they possibly house terabytes, if not petabytes of data? Is that actually possible? What do you think about that? Do you think they actually do have the capacity to store and process this data?
In 2013, you know, some problems was arising with that tapes.
I'm sorry?
You know, 17 and 25 December tapes.
Yes. So there was a actually eavesdropping scandal in 2013, I believe. Yes.
When this event is happened, you know, they went to TIB. Do you know TIB? Do you remember TIB?
It was a while ago.
There was a dangerous foundation.
Yes. So TIB was an organization that used to be what BTK is today. Is that correct?
We talked about the budget of BTK. Since they have a lot of money, one intelligence unit to track the telephone calling.
Yes.
And then 2 years later, to follow the internet publishment, that telecom communication unit is established under BTK. It was a different department. It was actually not a department of BTK. But since, as I told you, budget was very good, and they established that they had to buy a lot of software, hardware. They established the unit there. And after that, we saw that after TIB is closed, we saw that BTK is getting that duty over.
Yes.
Owen.
So we should expand on this. The TIB was a separate institution that was established under BTK. And TIB was a full-blown intelligence operation, but it was staffed by FETÖ members, allegedly, who tried to overthrow the government in 2013. And now that budget has been, and its responsibilities of spying responsibilities have been transferred over to BTK. Please go ahead.
So budget always belongs to BTK. BTK was paying TIB also, not different budget. After that, as I told you, actually that TIB was not making or not planning like this, get the intelligence in that way. They had all just was coordinator to collect that kind of intelligence. They were not track the intelligence, track the call, track the internet by themselves. But then everything is changed. Everything is put in a different way. And BTK is now listening, storing the people. You were asking that kind of huge store. Yes, they have, even in 2013, if you see in 2005, for the tracking of telephone calling, process was to store the telephone calling for 2 years, only 2 years. After 2 years, it would be delayed, but not.
No.
Now, when 2030, they saw that since 2005, all the telephone calling was there, stored.
So
now, again, same.
Right. So if they can keep telephone conversations all the way from 2005, receiving petabytes of data and storing them.
I think after 2013, they deleted all those, I suppose so.
Right.
But
Let's
then
hope.
after that 13, we don't know for last 9 years.
I see.
Maybe they are still storing. We don't know. There is no control.
But you do believe that with the tremendous budget BTK has, and since we've already seen that they're able to store massive amounts of data all the way back in 2005 or 2013, it is a very, very real possibility that they are actually tracking all of this information and keeping it. All right. One last question. What can we do about this legally? Can we do anything about this legally?
I'm always confusing to see the intellectual people of Turkey was not making something and was not trying to solve the problem, trying to, because we are looking at very confusing what is happening, how is happening. So actually, there is a lot of things to write, the things, to go to the court, to protest.
Right.
But we are doing nothing.
Which is fascinating to me. I think next week I'm going to have a psychologist on to expand on why there is so little reaction to what is perhaps the largest scandal of the last decade. But what you're saying, we don't actually have to be a political figure. We can just sue the government.
Sure. That means not political movement. That is civil organization, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. This is very weak. They are very weak. They are not acting. They are just watching around and complaining about opposite party is doing nothing. This is not the situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, politically, and the opposition has been anything but effectual, to say the least. Ms. Nebil, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, too.
And in the economy, the lira is doing its very best not to crack 18 to $1 this week, and it's been hovering around 17.9 for a few days now. Of course, that's not great news because the lira has lost a whole point since the beginning of the month in anticipation of the Fed's interest rate hike. What is more is that the economic confidence index is at its lowest point in the whole year. The TSI has just announced that the index is standing at 93.4% this month, still underwater by 6.5 points. Additionally, the central bank revises its year-end inflation projections and more than doubles it. The central bank's previous year-end projection was merely 18.6%, which to say it was charitable would be an understatement. Let's go to the details.
The Turkish Statistical Institute has published the Economic Confidence Index for the month of July. According to the numbers published by TSI, the Economic Confidence Index went from 93.6 points in June to 93.4 points in July, down by 0.2 points. These are the lowest numbers for the Economic Confidence Index this year. The Consumer Confidence Index, however, rose by 7.2 points and landed at 68.0. Economic Confidence Index above 100 points is bullish, showing optimism. Below 100 points is bearish, showing a lack of confidence. Central Bank President Shahap Kavcıoğlu also published the third inflation report of the year. The report includes the changes in expectations of year-end inflation, which rose by 18.6 points and reached 60.4. More optimistically, however, Kavcıoğlu also stated that the projected inflation for the end of 2023 was 19.2 points. The Turkish markets were on its heels this week as the Fed was gearing up to raise interest rates. As the Fed rose rates by 75 basis points for a second month in a row, the expectation has further destabilized the lira. The lira has been gradually losing value throughout the month, and with the expectation of the Fed's interest rate hike announcement, the lira has gone from 16.5 against the dollar in the early days of July to near 18 to the dollar today. Meanwhile, Turkey's 5-year credit default swap value was nearing 900 points, raising alarm bells for bondholders. According to the World Government Bonds, Turkey now carries a 14.85% risk of defaulting on its bonds, indicating dire market confidence problems for the Turkish economy.
And in international news, Turkey finally gets Russia to sign an agreement for grain shipments out of Ukraine to continue. In case you didn't know, the world, developing nations in particular, have been dealing with a crushing food shortage. There are mass food protests in Iran, food shortages in Africa. Wheat exports have been banned in India. But Russia and Ukraine have signed a deal setting up a coordination office to track shipments of grain out of Ukraine so the Russians don't blow them up as they make their way through the Black Sea. Additionally, Erdogan will be meeting with President Putin again next week, no doubt to discuss a green light for Turkey's potential operation into Syria. When President Erdogan met with President Putin in Tehran last week, he came back empty-handed. But he is nothing if not persistent because he will be trying his hand again on August 5th. Meanwhile, however, the president's spokesperson insists that we don't need anyone's permission. We'll invade if we want to invade. Strong words. Let's go to the details.
An agreement was reached between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul this week for Ukraine to resume shipping grain through the Black Sea, signaling a possible remedy for the current global grain crisis. On Saturday, Russia launched a missile attack on Odessa, hitting one of the ports used for shipping grain, while citing a strike on U.S.-supplied weapons to Ukraine, which further exacerbated the gridlock in Ukrainian ports. It is estimated that 20 million tons of grain are waiting at Ukrainian ports to be shipped out. One of the articles in the deal signed was the formation of a grain shipping coordination office in the National Defense University in Istanbul. The coordination office will include Russian and Ukrainian military personnel, as well as diplomats from the United Nations, whom will track and coordinate grain shipments from 3 ports in Ukraine. Additionally, despite Turkey's previous failed attempts to calm hostility between Russia and Ukraine, President Erdogan is set to visit President Putin in Sochi, Russia on August 5th. However, it is speculated that President Erdogan will once again seek Putin's blessing to launch another military offensive into Syria, which he failed to get last week when the pair met in Iran.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
President Erdogan had previously announced that Turkey would carry out a military operation into northern Syria to clear Tel Rifat and Manbij from YPG to create a safe zone. However, Russia and Iran have been unreceptive to Turkey's potential operation as Syria's strategic partners. Presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalin denies that Turkey needs anyone's go-ahead, however. In an interview with Bloomberg, Kalin stated, "We ensure the security of nearly 4 million people in the Idlib region while we continue our fight against terrorism. So a new military operation could happen at any time. We are not going to ask anyone's permission for this. We don't have to share our timetable with anyone, but an operation could be launched at any time based on our assessments of security risks."
And in domestic news, you tend to hear the name Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu a lot these days. No wonder, because he always has a way of pulling the limelight. Now, Turkey is fast approaching the 2023 presidential elections, and current incumbent President Erdogan is not looking so great when compared to every other potential big-name opposition candidate, except for one, and that is Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Best Kılıçdaroğlu can muster in most polls is a statistical tie against Erdogan, which has many in the opposition worried, because with all the attention he's been garnering, it looks like he might run against Erdogan and give him the best chance for winning a second term. But that's not stopping him from making headlines week after week. Say what you will, but the man has a bully pulpit and he knows how to use it. And this week, Kılıçdaroğlu says, don't buy a car. The Council of Ministers has just handed the president the authority to triple taxes on new vehicles if he so chooses, which, in a country that already has very low vehicle ownership rates, has Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu rubbed the wrong way.
According to the new ruling published in the Official Gazette on Tuesday, the president now has the authority to regulate tax rates on motor vehicles. Previously, this authority laid with the Council of Ministers, who could increase the tax up to 1-fold. But with the president's newfound authority, Erdogan could triple the taxes on new vehicles. Buying a new vehicle in Turkey is a notoriously crushingly expensive task for most. Besides the weakening purchasing power of the lira, taxes on a new vehicle can be up to 238% on top of the base price, just with VAT and motor vehicle tax. According to the CEIC, Turkey ranks 78th in vehicle ownership, with only a quarter of people owning vehicles, including commercial ones.
Sevgili halkım, iyi akşamlar. Evime hoş geldiniz.
Main opposition party chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu lost no time in objecting to the new regulations and released yet another one of his famous videos firing shots at the government. Don't buy a new car until we come to power. Don't buy a car. When we become the ruling party, we will eliminate motor vehicle tax. It will only apply to luxury vehicles, and those who buy them will be happy to pay their fair share. I don't want the automotive sector to get mad at me. I implore them to keep holding out a little bit longer. Once we get rid of vehicle taxes, they will more than make up for their losses. I am sure they know that if it keeps going like this, they too will lose in the end. That is why I am asking for patience.
And in other news, what was supposed to be a friendly game between one of Turkey's biggest football clubs, Fenerbahçe, and Dinamo Kiev has turned real ugly and gives a new meaning to the phrase, sore loser. Fenerbahçe fans started chanting Putin's name in minute 57 of the game when Vitaly Buyalsi scored Kiev's second goal. And Fenerbahçe fans did not take that very well. Have a listen. And this has been an especially large black mark on the record because in the previous game between Fenerbahçe and Dinamo Kiev, the Ukrainian spectators were chanting the now famous Bayraktar song as sort of a thank you. The Ukrainian folk song that praises the Turkish-made drones taking part in the Ukrainian conflict, of course. And regardless of where you stand on what Russia calls a special military operation, really chanting for a man who started one of the largest humanitarian disasters in recent history is objectively in poor taste. I don't usually do opinion on this show, but here's my 2 cents on the matter. Fellas, don't. Just don't. And with that, that's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat, Türsan. A special thanks to Mehmet Tanverdi for news text and Kathleen Phelps for voiceovers. And if you haven't already done so, folks, please consider subscribing to the channel and support us on Patreon if you can. And thank you for joining us.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.